Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Genesis chapter 50, verse 1, through Exodus chapter 2, verse 10. Then Joseph hugged his father's face. He wept over him and kissed him. Joseph instructed the physicians in his service to embalm his father, so the physicians embalmed Israel. They took 40 days, for that is the full time needed for embalming. The Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. And when the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's royal court, "If I have found favor in your sight, please say to Pharaoh, 'My father made me swear an oath. He said, I am about to die. Bury me in my tomb that I dug for myself there in the land of Canaan. Now let me go and bury my father, then I will return.' So Pharaoh said, 'Go and bury your father, just as he made you swear to do.' So Joseph went up to bury his father. All Pharaoh's officials went with him, the senior courtiers of his household, all the senior officials of the land of Egypt, all Joseph's household, his brothers, and his father's household. But they left their little children and their flocks and herds in the land of Goshen. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him, so it was a very large entourage. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, on the other side of the Jordan, they mourned there with very great and bitter sorrow. There Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father. When the Canaanites who lived in the land saw them mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, 'This is a very sad occasion for the Egyptians.' That is why its name was called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond the Jordan. So the sons of Jacob did for him just as he instructed them. His sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, near Mamre. This is the field Abraham purchased as a burial plot from Ephron the Hittite. After he buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, along with his brothers, and all who had accompanied him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, 'What if Joseph bears a grudge and wants to repay us in full for all the harm we did to him?' So they sent word to Joseph, saying, 'Your father gave these instructions before he died. Tell Joseph this: Please forgive the sins of your brothers and the wrong they did when they treated you so badly. Now please forgive the sin of the servants of the God of your father.' When this message was reported to him, Joseph wept. Then his brothers also came and threw themselves down before him. They said, 'Here we are your slaves.' But Joseph answered them, 'Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant to harm me, but God intended it for a good purpose, so he could preserve the lives of many people, as you can see this day. So now don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your little children.' Then he consoled them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph lived in Egypt, along with his father's family. Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw the descendants of Ephraim to the 3rd generation. He also saw the children of Machir, the son of Manasseh. They were given special inheritance rights by Joseph. Then Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am about to die, but God will surely come to you and lead you up from this land to the land he swore on oath to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.' Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath. He said, 'God will surely come to you. Then you must carry my bones up from this place.' So Joseph died at the age of 110. After they embalmed him, his body was placed in a coffin in Egypt. These are the names of the sons of Israel who entered Egypt. Each man with his household entered with Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah; Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin; Dan and Naphtali; Gad and Asher. All the people who were directly descended from Jacob numbered 70. But Joseph was already in Egypt, and in time Joseph and his brothers and all that generation died. The Israelites, however, were fruitful, increasing greatly, multiplied, and became extremely strong, so that the land was filled with them. Then a new king, who did not know about Joseph, came to power over Egypt. He said to his people, 'Look at the Israelite people, more numerous and stronger than we are. Come, let's deal wisely with them, otherwise they will continue to multiply, and if a war breaks out, they will ally themselves with our enemies and fight against us and leave the country.' So they put foremen over the Israelites to oppress them with hard labor. As a result, they built Pithom and Ramesses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more they multiplied and spread. As a result, the Egyptians loathed the Israelites. and they made the Israelites serve rigorously. They made their lives bitter by hard service with mortar and bricks, and by all kinds of service in the fields. Every kind of service the Israelites were required to give was rigorous. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, "When you assist the Hebrew women in childbirth, observe at the delivery. If it is a son, kill him, but if it is a daughter, she may live." But the midwives feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this and let the boys live?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for the Hebrew women are vigorous. They give birth before the midwives get to them." So God treated the midwives well, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he made households for them. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, "All sons that are born you must thrown into the river, but all daughters you may let live." A man from the household of Levi married a woman who was a descendant of Levi. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a healthy child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she was no longer able to hide him, she took a papyrus basket for him and sealed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and set it among the reeds along the edge of the Nile. His sister stationed herself at a distance to find out what would happen to him. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself by the Nile, while her attendants were walking alongside the river, and she saw the basket among the reeds. She sent one of her attendants, took it, opened it, and saw the child, a boy, crying. And she felt compassion for him, and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get a nursing woman for you from the Hebrews, so that she may nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Yes, do so." So the young girl went and got the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse him for me, and I will pay your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "Because I drew him from the water." So we had Jacob dying, Joseph embalming his father, and traveling to Mamre to bury his father there. The Canaanites seeing it, remarking that it was a sad day for the Egyptians. Then you have the death of Joseph. And like Jacob, his father, he also admonishes them to bury him in the land of Israel. Then you have a brief description of the children of Israel who came up with Jacob to Egypt, and a description of what happens after that generation passed away, how they became exceedingly fruitful and multiplied in the land of Egypt, and were subsequently oppressed by the Egyptians because there was a king who, quote, didn't know Joseph. Yeah. So there's an initial attempt by Pharaoh to kill the Israelite children in secret, essentially, by having the midwives slay the sons. But as the midwives feared God, that didn't succeed. So a more direct command was given that in Exodus 1:22, Pharaoh commanded all his people, "All sons that are born to you must be thrown into the river, but all daughters you may let live." And so you have a description of a man from the household of Levi, married a woman who was a descendant of Levi, and raises up a child for 3 months. But at the end of that time, she couldn't hide him, so she throws him into the river in a basket. And the daughter of Pharaoh actually takes compassion on her child, and she becomes the nursing mother of her own child. Let's see what Guzik has to say here. I guess first off, on that last point there, the description to kill all male children of a certain age sounds very much like the bit that Herod did when he heard that the king of the Jews was to be born, and that he went and slew all the Hebrew children under a certain age. Again, like messianic parallels. Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh. The fact that Joseph made his initial request, not directly to the ruler of Egypt, but spoke to the household of Pharaoh, is the kind of detail that would be noted by true witnesses of the events, and not made up by a storyteller. Oh yeah, also Joseph's brothers were worried that perhaps Joseph had some lasting animosity towards them because they had sold him into slavery. Before your father died, he commanded. This story was probably made up. They didn't feel they had a moral right to ask Joseph for mercy, since they sinned against him so greatly. So they put the request for mercy in the mouth of their honored and dead father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Joseph probably wept because it seemed that his brothers thought so little of him, and they doubted his character so greatly. Am I in the place of God? Joseph first understood he was not in the place of God. It wasn't his job to bring retribution on his brothers. If the Lord chose to punish them, he would have to find an instrument other than Joseph. From a human perspective, Joseph had the right and the ability to bring retribution upon his brothers, but he knew God was God and he was not. Such retribution was God's place, not Joseph's. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. Joseph did not romanticize the wrong his brothers did. He plainly said, "You meant evil against me." Although this was true, it was not the greatest truth. The greatest truth was God meant it for good. Every Christian should be able to see the overarching and overruling hand of God in their life, to know that no matter what evil man brings against us, God can use it for good. Joseph did not have the text of Romans 8:28, but he had the truth of it. And we know all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. Sadly, many of us who have the text do not have the truth. Ultimately, our lives are not in the hands of men, but in the hands of God, who overrules all things for his glory. There was an old minister who had a unique gift to minister to the distressed and discouraged. In his Bible, he carried an old bookmark woven of silk threads into a motto. The back of it, where the threads were knotted and tied, was a hopeless tangle. He would take the bookmark out and show the troubled person the side of the bookmark and ask them to make sense of it. They never could. Then the pastor would turn it over, and on the front were white letters against a solid background, saying, "God is love." When events in our life seem tangled and meaningless, it is because we can only see one side of the tapestry. Yeah. To save many people alive. As said before, if Joseph's brothers never sold him to the Midianites, then Joseph would never have gone to Egypt. If Joseph never went to Egypt, he would never have been sold to Potiphar. If Joseph was never sold to Potiphar, Potiphar's wife would never have falsely accused him of rape. If Potiphar's wife never falsely accused Joseph of rape, then Joseph would never have been put in prison. If Joseph was never put in prison, he would never have met the baker and butler of Pharaoh. If Joseph never met the baker and butler of Pharaoh, he would have never interpreted their dreams. If Joseph never interpreted their dreams, he would have never interpreted Pharaoh's dream. If Joseph never interpreted Pharaoh's dream, he never would have become prime minister, second in Egypt only to Pharaoh. If Joseph never became prime minister, he never would have wisely prepared for the terrible famine to come. If Joseph never wisely prepared for the terrible famine, then his family back in Canaan would have died in the famine. If Joseph's family back in Canaan died in the famine, then the Messiah could not have come from a dead family. If the Messiah did not come forth, then Jesus never came. If Jesus never came, then we are all dead in our sins and without hope in this world. We are grateful for God's great and wise plan. Yeah. And Joseph says to his brothers, "You shall carry up my bones from here." This promise was fulfilled some 400 years later, when Israel left Egypt. This command showed that Joseph's heart was in the promised land. It also proved him to be a man of great faith, trusting in things not yet seen. Yeah, ultimately, Joseph never saw the fulfillment of his request. Nor could he, but... In the event of war, that the Israelites might join our enemies and fight against us. At the time, the Egyptians feared invasion from the Hittites of the north. If the Hebrews among them joined with the Hittites, it posed a significant threat to their security. When the children of Israel were set to slave labor, they built many of the great cities and monuments in Egypt, though not the pyramids, which were built much earlier. Since we don't know exactly when this forced labor began, we don't know how long it lasted. Some estimate the slavery lasted 284 years, others 134 years. There is a famous wall painting on an ancient tomb from Thebes, Egypt, the tomb of the overseer of brick-making slaves during the reign of Thutmose III. The painting shows such overseers armed with heavy whips. Their rank is denoted by the long staff held in their hands and the Egyptian hieroglyphic determinative of the head and neck of a giraffe. We're looking everywhere. A man of the house of Levi went and took as wife a daughter of Levi. Exodus 6:20 tells us the names of Moses' parents, Amram and Jochebed. Fanciful Jewish legends say that Moses' birth was painless to his mother, that at his birth his face was so beautiful that the room was filled with light equal to the sun and moon combined, that he walked and spoke when he was a day old, and that he refused to nurse, eating solid food from birth. Interesting how these legends kind of grow to have the same sorts of features. Because, like, in the biography of Muhammad. There's a lot of those similar types of things, of like the room filling with light and being a painless birth and so on and so forth type things. She laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. In a literal sense, Moses' mother did exactly what Pharaoh said to do. She put her son into the river. However, she took care to put him in a waterproofed basket and strategically floated him in the river. The word for papyrus basket is used only here and for Noah's Ark. The Hebrew would be better translated by papyrus basket. Yeah. But more so, this was a great example of trusting the child's welfare and future to God alone. When Moses' mother let go of the boat made of bulrushes, she gave up something precious, trusting that God would take care of it and perhaps find a way to give it back to her. When Pharaoh's daughter adopted Moses, he became her son. Being the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter, Moses was in the royal family. The ancient Jewish historian Josephus wrote that Moses was heir to the throne of Egypt, and that while a young man, he led the armies of Egypt in victorious battle against the Ethiopians. Certainly he was raised with both the science and learning of Egypt. Acts 7:22 says Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and deeds. Egypt was one of the most academic and scientific societies among ancient cultures. It is reasonable to think that Moses was instructed in geography, history, grammar, writing, literature, philosophy, and music. Interesting. Anyhow, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.